Well, hello there.
Hello.
How's it going, bud?
I want to open up with today's talk with saying, fuck the ivory tower. Graduate level academia sucks.
Wow.
I want you to know that.
I am now well informed that academia sucks.
$100 per application, homie.
Why is it $100 per application?
Because they don't want poor people
Gotcha.
being there.
Gotcha. So, ixnay on the poorze.
Right, yeah.
All right. Fair enough. All right. Well, welcome back. Bound by the Scene. I am one of your hosts, Tentacle Bound, joined as always with Spirit Binder.
Hello. That's me.
How goes it? It's been a while.
You know how I'm doing it.
But the listeners...
I have been educated.
Oh, okay. Thoroughly?
Yeah, not quite thoroughly. I could always stand to be more educated.
Gotcha. They didn't grab a thesaurus and just shove it up your ass so you can gain the knowledge through osmosis?
They didn't have to do that. That's homework you did yourself.
You have to sit on the book and spin. Oof. That is no good. All right, some of the housekeeping before we go ahead and get started, because we have a special guest today. Before we get to her. Thank you, everybody, for the 3.3K views. You son of a bitch. There we go. I guess we've officially started. But yes, 3.3K views. Our subscribership jumped up from 16 to 23 on YouTube.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm a little surprised.
Right?
So in total, with the 4 subscribers on the actual podcasting platforms, let's see here, 37 people listen to us actively. By golly. Thank you. We do appreciate it. Again, do look for us on Apple, Google, and Spotify. We are on those platforms as well. But our baby, our love language of this podcast is Pornhub.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate it.
The hub do be supporting, though.
They really do. We do need to go get verified. That's the only thing we need to do. So, today's topic.
What is today's topic?
Today's topic is being a woman in kink.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's one thing that either of us do not know what the fuck is.
Right.
Because obviously I have male genitalia. I'd imagine you do too. If not, yours is probably one of those like...
Last time I checked, I did, yeah.
Okay, fair.
My robot body isn't in yet, and I really want it.
Well, it comes out tomorrow.
I want, like, some Alita Battle Angel shit.
I do too. I would love to have mix and match parts. Just cause.
It was like Thursday could be like a kid in a dick day. Like
a kid in a dick?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess Saturdays are reserved for the boys with the horse cock. Horse dong day for the boys. Got it. All right. So, today's guest is actually a female identifying individual. I'm going to blanket that term because I will not put words into their mouth. We have with us today, Porcelina. How are you doing today?
I'm Peachy. How are you?
Peachy?
Peachy Keen. No? Telling my age a little
bit? Age? No. Now they know where you're from. Dialect is important there.
Georgia.
From New Orleans. Nolans.
Wrong.
And that was the intent. Anywho.
We're deliberately lying to people. My specialty.
He did roll a nat 20 for lying when he was born, when they gave him his carriage creation sheet. Right before he exited the womb. So anyway, again, today's topic is going to be about being a woman in kink and what it entails, how it goes, and all the things that we generally, me and Spirit, will probably never have to endure. Well, partially because men are commodities too somehow in kink. Still trying to figure that one out.
They're different kind of commodities, right? I wouldn't buy a luxury car in the same situation I would want a blender. People have different needs. Exactly.
I bought this Tesla Model S because I needed a blender. What? What? It was there. Did you get the blender? No. Oh, fuck.
I think this bit has gone on too long.
It really has. Anywho. So, I guess to start off, what brought you into kink? Like, what was the general like thing that was like, oh, light bulb. I'm not vanilla. Oh shit.
Well, I had just gotten out of a serious relationship, a vanilla relationship. And I realized I wasn't satisfied, and I didn't know what was missing. And one day I went to the Google and just typed in BDSM, and popped up. First thing was FetLife, and that's
okay. So you entered by getting into a platform.
I did.
Okay. How long was it between when the relationship ended and before you started looking into kink? Like, how big was that gap?
Not big. I think maybe a month.
Okay.
That's a short amount of fucking time.
I was clearly unsatisfied for a lot longer before that, so...
That's a whole interesting type of conversation.
Well, there's so many ways that you can be dissatisfied in a relationship, and like it shows a good amount of self-knowledge that you're like, that's the thing I don't like. Yeah,
we've narrowed it down with a dartboard. It's like, oh shit, I got a bullseye. The fuck? My goodness. So in the concept of like finding out what kink is, a Google search is what drove you to FetLife. Mm-hmm. It's impressive because let's do this a fun little thing. We're gonna type BDSM in Google right now.
And mind you, that was like 6 years ago.
BDSM,
maybe more.
Why did BDSM marketing come up? I get Wikipedia. I get Elite Daily. BDSM meaning by Cosmopolitan, BuzzFeed. That's definitely not a way to... Interesting. So now, 6 years later, typing in BDSM into Google won't pull up FetLife, which is interesting. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you get all these different articles like BuzzFeed's top 25 things to figure out exactly why this spoon is kinky. And we don't know why.
You think FetLife is being like suppressed or something?
I don't think it's being suppressed as much as it's already...
Like BDSM has become more of a mainstream marketable thing.
Yeah. I think that's why BDSM marketing was actually like one of the top search things as I just pulled through. So, with that out of the way, what was the transition point like for you? Because kink can be either one of two things for some people. It can either be very jarring or very welcoming. It can be a slap to the face or it can be a pat on the back. How was that to you?
A little bit of both, to be honest. I think once I signed up and my first picture hit FetLife, it was like the floodgates opened and the attention was overwhelming. And I'm not saying like my first picture was like me completely nude, but it was just me in a dress. That was it. No revealing anything. And it was hundreds of messages within a week. And it was terrifying.
Yeah, because I think the misconception from a lot of male identifying people would be that like that would be a thing to be desired, but it does not quite sound like that was your experience.
No, and I guess I didn't know what to expect, but I did not expect that kind of reaction. And I quickly just started to ignore the attention and just started reading.
Okay, well, what are some of the things that you started reading up on? Because everybody has a baseline for what they feel that they are when they get into kink, or sometimes they just don't have the vocabulary for it. Like, what would you say was one of the first things that you read that struck your attention as far as, like, you doing your research was?
I didn't have much to go off of at that point. I hadn't been exposed to BDSM very much. Few instances, but nothing too in-depth. And I started just reading about submission, because that was something that I did have kind of a little bit of an idea about. And I wanted to know more. I wanted to know, does this fit me? And at the time, I thought it did, because I didn't know anything else. So I kind of dove deep into that, and then looking into the local scene to see what was there. And I was in Indianapolis at the time. So
what goes on in Indianapolis?
Sounds like a whole
lot of nothing.
Sounds like a whole lot of nothing.
Yes. But luckily there was a pretty decent scene at the time. A very tight-knit community, but it was mainly just I wanted human connection with people that, you know, understood, because I had not a clue of what what I wanted and who I was. I just knew there was something missing.
Gotcha. So, is it safe to assume that you're either strictly submissive, or a switch, or a mistress, a master, or as a recently coined term, you're just dom? It's not dame. Fun fact. Interesting how language changes a whole bunch of things. It's dom, not dame. Please just remove the gender norm from it, please. Thank you, for the love of God. So, what do you identify as?
I would say more of a switch than anything, but there's many other layers than that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that would be the majority of people. But that's fair. That is fair. Always got to peel back layers like skin.
I feel like part of really coming into your own, like the puberty of the kink life, as it were, is when you start to pick up all of your nuances.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. I mean, let's see. I started off thinking I was submissive way back when, and then that changed, and then all the little nuances, all the little nitty-gritties started coming in. Mm-hmm. Then we started dotting our I's, crossing our T's, and now you get this! A mistake to mankind. Mm-hmm. Speaking to you right now.
I started off thinking I was submissive, so I was kind of in the same boat, but again, I didn't really know. What
changed your mind? Was it
experience?
Was it just the experience of being a submissive, or I've known a lot of people that like they enjoy being submissive, but nobody around them can dom correctly,
right? So
they take up the dom position to get like any satisfaction and eventually run into people that can dom them well enough.
I think it takes a very specific person for me to want to submit to, and I feel like some people can be or feel submissive 100%, and that's just who they are around everyone. And for me, it takes a very strong individual for me to want to give them my submission, because it's not something that I can give easily.
Right, and I remember you prioritized human connection when you were saying what you came to BDSM for.
Definitely connection first above anything, and I feel like that connection, that interpersonal connection, is what develops what I can give and what I feel comfortable giving.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's the majority of the kink community that tends to operate like that?
Honestly, no. I think people who have been in it for a while have a good understanding of who they are and what they want, so it's easier to kind of narrow it down to what you're looking for and who you're looking for. But I feel like for the majority of the people who are newbies, who are baby kinksters, myself included, when I was 6 years ago starting out, I hadn't a clue, so I just kind of narrowed my viewpoint, like, okay, I think I'm submissive, these are what submissive things do, and this is what I have to look for a dom.
Rather than,
exactly, because I wasn't exploring. I hadn't explored enough to find out who I really was in this world.
Mm-hmm. In the amount of exploration that you've done, there's a lot of things that come up as of late about fake dominance, fake submissives. Mm-hmm. What is your take on that aspect of a fake submissive?
I think it just boils down to lack of knowledge. I don't think it has anything to do with ulterior motives, maybe for some submissives, but I think for the main part, it's just they don't know any better. They don't know who they are yet, so they think they're submissive, and kind of like I was, in a sense.
It may also matter who is calling somebody else a fake submissive, because it's like, it could be a lack of knowledge and they're not performing in the way that they said they would for the scene, or it could be a vindictive dom trying to neg somebody because they're not submitting to them, per se. Yeah. And sometimes people are trying to dom and you're like, you ain't it, chief.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's where the concept of also fake dominance comes into play.
I'm not going to call you daddy if I have to watch you suck the Dorito dust off your fucking fingers.
I mean, that is a kink for some. You
can't yell at your mom in the living room, then come back and call me kitten. That's not going to work for me.
So that's a kink for someone, I hope. To God, it's not, but it is.
No, these are kind of stories that I've heard from friends of mine that are subs for doms they have to put up with because they don't know how to find better ones.
Yeah, I don't... This is why dominance and submission is a very complicated topic in and of itself.
Right, like, on the subject for me, like, I wouldn't consider myself a dom, I would consider myself a top.
Yeah, and that's a specific role that you've decided to put yourself in. Like, somebody else calling you dominant is a bit different than you calling yourself a dominant. Because the other person has to feel that you are in a superior role as opposed to you. Because you can sit here and say all that all day long. The person that you're dating doesn't feel that way. It's obviously going to be some static.
Right,
not the good kind. So, speaking of being a woman in kink, what are some of the things that you've noticed be a lot more difficult for you than for male in kink? Whether it be male submissives, male dominance, female submissives, female dominance. Like, there's definitely a...
Are you talking, like, access stuff? Like areas of kink that are harder to access as a woman?
Yes.
That's a good question. I think in my experience, it's been more difficult to be taken seriously as a top. So in my little switch role, when I do want to top, sometimes it takes a lot more kind of proof, or I don't know. I feel like it's not taking us seriously as a male can walk into a room and be like, who wants to bottom? And like, there's, 20 women running, and for the most part, a woman coming into the room, it's like, they don't take you seriously.
That's interesting. That is very interesting.
Have you seen that happen?
Yes, actually. You see it in the rigging community. And you see it in the leather community. You see that in those two specifically. I don't know so much about primal. Again, I am not a primal expert. I can't say anything on that notion. But I have seen that as far as, like, there's a couple of dominant women that I know off the top of my head that as soon as they enter a room, there is a dick size contest that arrives with them. Yeah. And it's usually like they have to
play the male dominance game.
Mm-hmm. It's a tit for tat at that point. Like, they have to, like, show their fucking stripes.
Have you seen that?
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely.
Do you feel like when you're doing that, you have to graft on like a new aggressive part to your personality that may not necessarily be true to yourself just to get access to that?
In some circumstances, yes. I think in the beginning, in a new environment with people that I wasn't too familiar with, I think I really did have to play that role in order to get my feet wet. But now, in a community that I'm familiar with and I have some experience with, it's easier because there's connection built. There's relationships made. So it's much easier now. But in the beginning, I think I had to play the part.
Kind of social capital that can take the place of having to prove yourself to the boys.
Exactly.
Do you feel that you have to prove yourself to both men and women when it comes to being a top, or is it more so to men that you're trying to get to bottom to you?
It's more men that I have to kind of prove myself with. With women, it's a lot easier. Much easier. More effortless. They feel more comfortable for the most part.
Do you still feel like there's a barrier there, though?
Not so much, no. Okay. Not with women.
Okay.
I wonder if that's due to the fact that there's this camaraderie that kind of gets built around, like, for the female gender, because it becomes a little bit more effortless, as you said, that with women.
I think that may be kind of a boy stereotype, because I know a lot of boys think that all girls get along because they're girls.
That's fair.
And don't see some of the catty shit that goes on. But when you've got an insular community like Kink, I think that's, like, it's going to be exasperated to one side. From what I've seen, people are either going to really like each other or they're really going to not.
Yeah, there's definitely a large divide in that.
I mean, do you feel like that's accurate?
I think so. I definitely think there's a very small, tight-knit group that I would feel completely comfortable with. But if you put every kinkster together, it would be probably a good 5% of that.
I wonder what kind of bloodbath that would end up being.
Oh my god.
Put every Kinkster in the community together and just unleash all holy hell. I wonder who it'd be a king of the hill. Which rigger gets on top? Which Spanko goes on bottom? We will find out next time.
I'd pay to see that.
I would too. I would too. Mention in the comments if you want to see the Kink Battle Royale in a city near you. So I think we can get into this other portion of the conversation of how being a female while on FetLife is a thing. Because you mentioned earlier on that a single photo that you weren't doing anything overly lewd, as it were, you were just in a dress. Photo was taken, you posted it, and all of a sudden you get this massive amount of DMs. How, aside from like blocking any of them or like the obvious like, hey, how do you deal with all that? Aside from just like from then to now, like what was the transition like specifically? Because some of them can get really intricate and be like, hey, by the way, I'm trying to get to know you, trying to do this, trying to do that. Others are very, look at my dick.
It has changed drastically. I think in the beginning, out of politeness and not kind of knowing how to handle that, it was, okay, I gotta respond. I gotta message these people because they're taking the time to reach out to me. And then it took not very long for me to realize it felt like a meat market, and it was just, let's hook up, or fake doms, if you will, saying, you need to do this, you get on your knees, and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, some of them can be very bold and brazen, and...
keyboard warriors.
Yes, absolutely. And then you go to their page, and you're like, what?
This is one picture of you in a fedora and a vest that doesn't fit.
And you're tilting.
I don't know why. I do know why. I've just been very critical of how people present.
Yes.
You instantly went to the milady image.
Well, because like since I've started like studying like fashion and makeup and stuff, and understanding like how part of how you build yourself is performative, and like once that clicks, you see that like, oh, all the mechanisms are here for everything. This is everyone's first language, as it were. So when I don't see people taking the steps, it's like, you know that thing is like, I tried for 50 hours to do this, finally figured out how, now anyone that can't do this is a fucking moron. Like, I'm there with that right now.
Man, that was me the other day when I learned that you just had to flip one piece of rope to like, motherfucker! And
it's also like all of my, like in the past 3-4 years, I've been able to get into groups that are like primarily women, which is a completely different experience if you're coming up as a nerd boy. And I'm also hearing all of their horror stories over the years, so any archetype that I consistently see in there is now a person I hate.
That's fair. And I think once you get that insider's perspective, you realize how much of that is out there. And then you add, a kink platform, and it's ramped up tenfold.
Yeah.
Because you can be.
Right. There's like this permission to do it, quote unquote. And because we're a subculture, it's harder to oust people from the thing. Because you can't lightly be like, stop that, go away. There has to be like, that's fine, or you need to undo. Like, you need to not exist right now.
You need to commit unalive instantly.
You go that far. We just need to undo that from the community. Like, if you come into the bar, they're like, fuck you, Larry, you gotta leave, like, the moment they walk in. Like,
you definitely have to be a lot more cut and dry in this community, in this lifestyle. But back to the messages, the DMs. After maybe a few days, maybe less, I don't know, of responding to message after message.
It was like not even a week.
Yeah, not even. I was over it. Like, I would look at the message, if it spoke to me, or I felt like, okay, this individual actually wants to get to know me, not just, get in my pants, then I would respond, or I would look at their profile. But it just became, I got jaded very fast, because it was just the same thing, the same dick pic, the same let me be your dom kind
Didn't even put good lighting on it.
No.
There was no contouring.
You see the toilet below.
At least put your dick through a ring light. Like,
put your dick through your ring light. Get some mascara.
I got that, homie?
There you go. Put some mood lighting on. Get the fuckboy red lights on.
Get your dirty laundry out of the background. You know.
Have standards.
Effort.
Like if you're gonna take a bathroom pic with your dick out, like wipe the mirror out. Like make sure there's not like short and curlies on the toilet or something like that. Like just. Make it look presentable.
Well, here's the thing that I want to illuminate, and it's been a problem for me for a long time. A lot of men are not taught what is attractive and what is not attractive, which means a lot of them have to fire off in the dark, and I don't think that that's good that they have to do that. And it can create some truly cringe results, and I think... like, in general, I think a thing that kink could be used for is understanding the rules for what are attractive to other people.
That's true. That's
part of why we do negotiation in the first place, right?
Yeah, that is. And this is why you can see a lot of different facets when it comes to, like, what is actually attractive to people as opposed to what we deal with in the middle of the world. Because a lot of it does trickle in, which is why I'm assuming you would have gotten any of these issues, like, oh, the dick pics, the hookup culture.
And I want to make it clear, I'm not apologizing for any of the myriad of dick pics that came at you. I'm more trying to find out why that happened and how we can replace that norm with something better.
I think that's a good way of looking at it. For all,
like, the baby boy kinksters that are coming into this.
I wish more people would just be themselves. You don't have to put on a facade. What if yourself as a horny
person with a giant dick?
Well, then you need to go to a different platform.
Okay.
There are plenty out there that if you need to get your dick wet, you can, but if you're in a BDSM specific platform, then that should be the focus.
Okay.
I think this goes back to a little bit like, maybe they're masquerading as a hedonist. Who knows?
You can put that in your profile.
You can definitely. But
I guarantee you'll find people.
Oh, we could do this now, but I'm not going to because I'm fucking lazy. Just how many people are hedonists on FetLife? That's their MO. That's it.
And that's fine.
That's great.
But do you think the people in these messages were legitimately trying their best to connect with you, or were they just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks?
Very few were trying to connect. I would say the majority were just trying to see, will she respond? Will she date me? Will she go out with me? Will she let me be her whatever? I don't think it was genuine.
Like these milestones that would objectify you in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I felt like after a while, okay, I'm just a thing to them. I'm just a play toy. And while that's fun in the right hands, it wasn't what I was looking for.
Like
I wanted a connection.
You have to connect first, then play toy.
For me, yes.
Okay. I feel like that's the standard for most people, but some people are so deprived that they don't know what they need.
Right.
Like, when you're starving, a Big Mac is a fucking feast. And I think that's the case for a lot of those people, because on the boy side is the exact opposite experience, right? It is radio silence forever.
Yeah. Yep. My inbox is dry as shit.
And I want to emphasize that, like, one of these is not better than the other.
No.
It's two very drastic extremes. There needs to be a middle ground here.
Yeah, they're both detrimental to self-esteem in wildly different ways.
Definitely.
Because one side is, I have been turned into an object, and the other side is, I don't even know if I exist.
And there's a problem on both of those.
Oh, yeah. And when we finally figure out how to address those accordingly, as far as the community is concerned, we can tackle that a lot better. Because I think a lot of what we, as people that have been in the lifestyle for a while it is not our duty to educate people, it's not like someone bestowed the crown of knowledge on all of our heads and like, you are now going to teach the masses.
Well, it's our duty.
We made it our duty.
That's why we have this podcast.
Yeah.
But I feel like I've been doing like a counter, this is what it's like to be a boy in kink. I'm going to try and stop doing that for the rest of this conversation because it's not what it's about.
It's to verify that there are going to be extremes as far as what men experience, what women experience. Like, again, what we experience is usually radio silence, unless you have skills. If you have skills, that proves just about everything everybody else needs to know, whether you're good or really bad as a person. For women, it sounds like there's a lot of like, okay, well, I'm either a piece of meat or I'm going to kick you in the dick.
Which I'm just angry meat.
Exactly.
I'm angry. It's the longhorn before it has been harvested. Like
angry meat. I'm going
the difference between domination and submission is whether or not the slaughterhouse has occurred yet.
Exactly. That's fair. Someone make that a shirt, just like angry meat.
Longhorns are dickheads, and I want you to know that.
Apparently so. I've
had to work with them before. They're very mean animals.
I believe it. A giant fucking 2-ton animal with horns.
I was working on a friend of mine's farm, and the longhorn just comes up to his four-wheeler and fucking upends that motherfucker.
You, sir, are not supposed to be upright. Yeet.
Anyway.
Definition of angry meat. Got it.
Definition of angry meat is a female has gotten too many dick pics and too many DMs. Got it. So, I think what we're going to do is we're going to kind of do something funny towards the end of the actual episode. She'll read one of her DMs.
God.
If you're comfortable with that. If you're not, it's fine. But I think there's a few other things that I'd like to kind of go into as far as...
Well, one thing that I'd like to do now, because I'm sure you have other topics, but I'd like to kind of step back from, like, the leading questions.
Okay.
And, like, as someone who's explaining what it's like to be a woman in kink, what do you feel is never, like, talked about? What do you think needs more of a message or a platform?
Ooh. I think, for me, I wish other female tops, bottoms, would have reached out to me and taught me about negotiations, taught me about red flags to look out for. So I wish I would have had that. Not until years later, I sat down at a submissive roundtable or a bottoms roundtable or whatever, but it was so enlightening, and I was just like, man, if I would have learned half of this stuff back then when I first started, or even been just exposed to it, I would have had a much different and more enjoyable experience.
Right.
Because a lot of that stuff isn't explicit unless you're really digging deep, and I didn't know where to look in the beginning.
Right.
So I had to learn it the hard way, unfortunately. So I think negotiations, big one. Red flags, another big one. Safety calls. What? I didn't learn that until years later.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Strange.
So
no, it makes it checks out.
I'm getting the feeling that that's a common experience for women in kink.
Unless they're getting into a scene in a big city that has a lot of resources, I think that is a very common thing. I mean, Indianapolis is not a big city in comparison to others, but I feel like it's not something that's spoken enough of. Especially for newbies.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
No, it did.
Any other things you feel like just go over the head of people?
Safety. Knowing your risks. I think you kind of, for me, I learned them as I went until I realized, okay, I need to take a little bit more ownership. And I guess I expected, okay, so in the beginning, I was much more in that submissive mindset, looking for more tops, more dominant personalities, thinking, okay, well, I was putting a lot more responsibility onto them.
Right.
Because I thought they knew better. I thought this was their role. But in realization now, that's not the case.
Right.
I should have been more in control of that.
So do you think there's this idea that dominants should know better, that is kind of like a norm that may not be true a lot of the time?
I think it's something that a lot of bottoms or submissives really believe, that, oh, they're the top. They know better. They know how to, take care of me. They know how to do aftercare. They know how to negotiate. So I don't need to worry about that.
Right.
I've sat down with so many bottoms and it's like, okay, let's negotiate. What? What is that?
Like, oh,
You've been in what? And how long have you been in the scene? For years? Okay, so here we go. Yeah, it's alarming, but it's quite common.
A thing that I find interesting is you pointed out that you wished a female voice had taught you that early on.
Yeah, I think it would have been easier to receive.
I think that's very valuable information to have, because like part of why we're doing this podcast is to like disseminate this kind of information to people. But like sometimes I underestimate how important it is to have somebody that is like you telling you about these things.
Yeah, definitely. Because you can have tops or dominants or masters telling you need to do these things, but unless you experience it or unless you learn it, it's much harder to receive. Then you have someone who's similar to you, who likes to bottom, who maybe has submissive tendencies, or telling you, okay, hey, this is from my experience, you should definitely check out, reading this, or making sure you learn how to negotiate, or what are your limits,
listen to this podcast.
Listen to this podcast. Just learn, educate yourself, be your own advocate, because unless you go and reach out, most of the time the community won't reach out to you. You have to be the one to put in the effort.
Okay.
I wonder why that is. Well, I think I know why that is. The concept of reaching out to people and like forcing yourself into their life is I think it's a bit of a no-no still.
And it may also be a character, like a red flag for people who are overly dominant. Because, like, teaching somebody gives you power over them, period, end of story. Like, you create a secondary level of hierarchy whenever you start teaching somebody.
True.
And that can be leveraged for bad shit. Cult leaders do it all the time.
Right.
We're looking at you, Jared Leto.
So, yeah. So I could be in the position where I was like, boy, I sure wish somebody would teach me. And somebody was like, I'm going to teach you the ropes. And I'm like, I don't like you. But at the same time, like, it is very nice to be warmly welcomed into a group and being taught the ropes.
Yeah.
I see what you did there. But I'm getting way too old for that.
So would you recommend that newer women in the scene, like, just pick people they think are very interesting and reach out to them until somebody bites? Or
honestly, the best thing to do is to, well, when it's safe to do so, go to munches, go to classes, meet people, learn about them, and find someone that you want to learn from. Find someone that you can trust, and you see, okay, that's something I want to do or I want to learn. Go and talk to people and ask them questions. The more you learn, the more you experience, even through just watching or just talking to people, the more you will feel comfortable and be safer.
Yeah, because I know we emphasize safety a lot on this podcast. But it's occurred to me that the performance of making yourself safe may be different from a woman's perspective, or from a perspective that just isn't mine. Because, like, I grew up in a culture of violence, so I've been fighting for a long time, and I've, like, when you grow up with something, you just automatically apply it to the situation.
Right.
It was like, if I'm in danger, what do? Punch in face? No, we don't do that. We don't want to go to jail.
And I think for women, too, if you find yourself, you feel like you're a submissive, or you feel that that's something you want to explore within yourself, find another submissive and reach out to them. It can be really intimidating as a woman or anyone coming into a lifestyle that's different from the norm. It's scary to begin with. And if you already feel you are submissive or have those tendencies as a bottom in any form, it's even more scary because you're coming into a room and you're like, I want to ask about these things, but I'm terrified and I don't know who to trust. Go find someone who you feel mirrors what you want and talk to them. Get a bird's eye perspective from them.
Yeah, I know with how I like to enter groups, I like to emphasize like the rolling crew, like 3 or 4 people that come into an event. So you can be a little bit more brave because you have a group. Like I've brought 3 straight cishet guy friends with me to Munches before, who their job is just to vibe and make me comfortable, and like, in their quotes, maybe talk to some freaky bitches, unquote.
Yes, the ever-looming thing, talk to the freaky bitches.
But like, that puts me in a position where I've got like ways to split attention, I've got a place to be comfortable if I'm there, and also they're probably more embarrassing than I am, so that puts me at an advantage.
That's a good way to look at it.
Nice.
Do you think the same like methodology would hold up for women?
I think it definitely could. What I did when I finally got the courage to go to a class, I looked at the attendance list, and I looked at the people, and I'm like, okay, who on this list, 'cause I didn't know anybody, do I feel like comfortable with? Like, who would be someone that I could talk to, that maybe I could reach out to? And I found a younger submissive, and I just messaged out of the blue, terrifying, so I understand, it's freaking terrifying, and it's just like, hey, I'm new, I want to go to this thing. Are you going to this thing? And then conversation. Can you be my guide? 'Cause I'm terrified. And they're like, yeah, of course. And they were really welcoming. They were really open to it. And they made me feel so comfortable. And having that kind of safety net at that first experience was everything. I can't imagine doing it by myself. So yeah, I definitely think if you're bringing people that you're comfortable with, you know, your friend, your vanilla friends, whatever, great. If you're going and you reach out to someone that you're like, okay, this is maybe a leader from this group, maybe I'll reach out to them. That would be another good option, and say, hey, I want to go to this, but, you know, can I meet up with you earlier? Can we chat? Or just reach out to someone and bring someone so you feel comfortable.
Okay. Do you feel like women have to do more like homework and due diligence as compared to men in BDSM?
In what way?
Because I've heard a lot of you saying you need to make sure these things are happening. You need to make sure you're educated. It is on you to reach out to the people. And like all of that sounds like a lot of work. These are things that I naturally do.
Right.
But I don't know if a lot of men in BDSM have to do the same level of footwork to be able to be safe and make sure they have a good experience.
I think it is different for the female side of things. There's a lot of predators. I mean, there's predators anywhere you go, but go to BDSM and it's harder to spot them.
Right.
So, yes, I think, and all the things that I'm saying now are things that I've learned,
right.
You know, through my journey.
This is all bought with blood money.
Exactly. Right. I had to learn the hard way, and some really bad experiences and some good, but it's definitely I wish I would have done things like this back then.
Okay.
So my only thing that I can say I did great was that first munch. Right. Getting to know someone and getting them to be with me during that was excellent.
Okay, so when we get to the end of our session, I'd like for you to give us like a top 5 tips for new women in BDSM.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you beforehand, so I'm not like, go!
Fair.
By the way, you're starting now. I think that's a lot of interesting information, because looking at this from a strictly top perspective, I can't say that I've had to do any of that. I cannot. I think maybe one event, it's about 6 years ago, that I went to, I had my roommate at the time go with me. And that was because, again, like you had mentioned earlier, that when you went to a munch and you brought your cishet friends, they wanted to talk to some freaky bitches. I was like, all right, that's fucking weird. All right. I just want to vibe, man. And that was about it. Every other thing that I've ever done, I've never had to do that. Maybe a safety call. Maybe one of those occasionally. But that's about it.
Yeah, I make a pretty big point about being intentional about most of the things I decide to do, because like anything worth doing is worth S-ranking. So I put a lot of preparation towards stuff, but I believe that I'm an outlier in most senses of that thing. Unless it's somebody's like profession or a hobby that should be treated as a profession. I don't feel like that's the norm.
It definitely isn't. It really, really isn't. Like,
because I believe people also don't have my crippling anxiety about failure.
Probably not. I know there's a lot of people both on the female identifying, male identifying spectrums that just jump in headfirst without any regard.
Hi.
So all the things that she said earlier are no longer valid.
No, that was me in the beginning. For the most part.
I got that. That was sarcasm.
Oh.
You can't tell over audio.
Gotcha. Makes sense now.
Let's see. We got a couple more things that we can probably discuss. And then we'll get into the luxurious reading of the DM. Anywho, I think, is there any particular resource that you've consistently gone back to and handed to people? Like, for me, it's just like one thing, whether it was like a book, whether it was just like this random article that was like, hey, that makes a lot of sense. Because there's one thing for me specifically that I always like harken back to as far as like something that I give to people that are kind of starting out. It's usually something like BDSM and law. Like, that's one thing that I always like, hey, by the way, just so you know, there are certain laws that you want to maintain and understand before you start doing some of the things. Like, obviously, you cannot consent to bodily harm. That's one of the things, and that will actually land you an assault charge. Is there something like that for you at all, by any chance? If not, that's perfectly fine.
Are you saying you'll allow it?
I mean, it's not my place to say I'll allow anything or not, but that's not my job.
No, there's not any one single thing for me.
Okay, so there's a multitude of things, like a stack. Like you have a dissertation written off to the side.
There's a lot of information out there. And to me, it really should be catered to the individual.
Fair. Very fair. That is fair. I think that's about it for what I have to, like, ask or anything of the sort. I think we can get into, like, the top 5 resources that Spirit wanted to...
Yeah.
The thing that you would inform a baby kinkster of the they-them female-identifying genre of people.
So my top 5 things that every...
Number 5!
Thank you, BuzzFeed announcer.
But seriously though, the top 5 things that this can go for women, this can go for men, anyone who's getting involved into BDSM, if you're new, that you should look into before anything else. Do your homework. What is vetting? Learn how to vet. If you see someone you want to play with, you want to do a scene with, you want to be in a relationship with, dynamic, whatever, find out who they've played before. Past partners. Talk to them. If they say, no, you cannot vet me, red flag, run away. Vetting. So that's a big one. Next one is knowing your limits. I hear so many people, so many newbies come into the scene. start talking. So what are your limits? Oh, I don't have any.
Great.
Excuse me, what?
Great. I can string you up from your big toe and skin you alive and pour lemon on you. What? No, I can't do that. There's your limit.
And that's a problem. You need to know what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with. So,
do you think that's part of the language? Like, because we're specifically using the word limits? Because there are things that are within my limits that I don't like.
I mean, language does play a big part. Whether it's a soft limit where you don't really like it, but you'll tolerate it, or if it's a hard limit, like death.
Right.
That's a hard limit for me. So I think it's just knowing what you're comfortable with and figuring that out, learning that, writing it down, researching it, and just know what you want, know what your limits are.
Thankfully, death is a soft limit for tentacle.
Not surprised. Another big one, negotiating. Learn how to negotiate. Even as a bottom, you should know what to expect.
Right.
You should know what things you need to ask for.
Where does someone go to learn to negotiate?
There are a lot of resources online. FET has a wealth of knowledge if you dig for it. There are places like this lovely podcast that you can listen to get more knowledge.
Hooray.
Hooray.
A plug. Interesting.
You're welcome.
That wasn't scripted.
What kind of plug? We have to specify.
A fidget spinner butt plug.
Sounds fun. Put that on my list.
Distracted.
What? Stop distracting me. Another one, be risk aware. If you want to get tied up, great. What are your risks? What can your body handle? If you have tendinitis in your knee, you should probably let your top know. Be aware of what will happen what will happen when my fingers go numb? Like, what are the risks involved to what you want to do?
Can you explain to the people the difference between a risk and a limit?
A risk is knowing what could happen, what something bad could happen during a scene, and knowing how to take care of that if that does come to it. A limit is... Let's use rope as an example. So a limit in rope is I don't want someone's rope touching my genitalia.
Right.
A, I don't know where it's been. B, sanitation. B, C, D, E, sanitation. But a limit, so that would be a limit, let's say. And a risk is being suspended by your neck. Not a limit for some people. But it's a high risk.
Right, and they should know that going into it.
Exactly. And if you don't know that, then you haven't done your homework and you probably shouldn't be being suspended. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think the next one, which you touched upon, is a safety call. Anytime, I wish I would have known this more so in the beginning than anything, but if you're going to be meeting with someone, whether it's in this community or not, and you've never met them before, and you're going to go do something risky with them, something that could be potentially dangerous, get someone else to check in with you. Have a safety plan. If you don't, have them track your location.
I'd say this is a good idea outside of Kink. Like, I've got a group of like 5 or 6 people I hang out with, from various Discord groups, and anytime any of us go to hook up with somebody, we will always post the phone number of the person going and the address that they're going to. That's
perfect. And you tell them, I want you to check in with me at this time. If I don't respond in X amount of time, then you have every right to send someone over, call the police, whatever the case. So whatever you need to feel safe.
Yeah, and the police understand what safety calls are, so you can be like, this person asked me to safety call them, they have not been back, here's the address that they went to, here's their phone number.
Exactly.
Do the thing.
Do whatever.
Exactly. So, those are my top 5.
This was Watch Mojo Duck. Alright, now for the piece de resistance, the last little bit of it. What DM are you going to grace us with today?
Oh, God.
That sounds like there's a terrible one waiting.
Do you want to give us a top 5?
There's too many.
Oh,
I'll be right back.
all right.
Number 1.
Should have warned me about this.
I did. I warned you throughout the entirety of the podcast.
Okay, before that. Because now I have to scroll through and...
Just randomly go and pick one.
But they're not all randomly bad.
They're not randomly bad. I mean, that's fair. That's fair. Some of them are just bad.
Yeah.
Others are not that even worth time. Kind of like my life. Not worth my time.
Wow.
All right, it's a thing. It definitely is a thing.
It is a big thing.
Usually, from what I've been told. What?
Oh, gosh. Seriously, though.
Did you find one yet?
Still looking.
So this is the part of the conversation. This is the part of the podcast where we just dead silence everything. You will not get. You will not get any lo-fi and chill music. You won't get any Japanese pop music. You won't get anything other than.
It's your fault.
This is not my fault. This is definitely not.
You should have warned me, so I could have gone through this before this podcast.
But I did.
No.
Yep.
No.
Are we starting another episode?
No. I'm just a thirsty bitch.
That is fair. That is entirely fair. My goodness. It is amazing how fucking big this thing is growing. Like, it just surprises me. Like, I looked at the analytics for everything, and it just there's on YouTube there was a 999% increase on watch time. Wow. I'm like, what?
It's not just me.
I swear I do not have bots loading on my computer, just rewatching everything over and over and over again.
Oh, here's a funny thing. There's this YouTube channel I watch called Folding Ideas. He's got this video series called A Lukewarm Defense of 50 Shades. And a lot of the fixes that he implemented involved, like, less of the sex scenes.
Less of sex scenes. Did you find
because like there's a thing with like sex scenes where if you're going to use them in a narrative, it needs to further the narrative.
True.
Like if you make them interesting enough to be spectacle, they're porn now. If they don't further the character, then I don't care that it's happening. If it doesn't further the plot, it shouldn't be in there. Like
from a storytelling perspective, that does make sense. It seems like you have found one.
I mean, this one is cringy for me.
Hey,
it's not my kink, and it might be for some, but this is just one of the many that are very similar to this. This one just happens to cringe me out a little bit more than.
Did someone ask you to be a public toilet for them?
No, but I have a message like that. This one, the subject says forced pregnancy. That's the subject.
Breeding. A kink that I will never understand.
And this only has 2 sentences. I want to chain you to my bed and fill you up all night long. I want to breed you every day. The end.
Talk about objectification. They're talking about you like you're a car.
I mean, my God. The biggest thing that's running through my head right now with that entire sentence is like, well, 2 sentences, is the concept of breeding involved that you already knock the person up, right? Am I wrong or am I right?
You're right.
Okay. So how would you get bred every day? Would they just like punch you in the stomach and have you miscarry as soon as you got pregnant?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say maybe like methodological analysis may not be this person's forte.
Probably not. breeding kink is an interesting facet of what people like doing. I get it.
Why do people think messages like that will work?
That is a fantastic question.
Because some people are actually receptive to it.
Are they?
I can see, because there's this weird thing where I've noticed that some people actually do respond to these things. Like, some people do find the internet like thing a fantasy. Like, you can go on Reddit and role play with people, whether it's actually like this or that.
Statements like that are so similar to like the kind of statements that stalkers will send to my friends. So like,
yeah. I
don't get how stalker language can be hot.
I don't.
Like, I can accept that it is to some people, but I will never sympathize with it. I will never understand it.
I don't. Just don't. Like, I'm not sitting here to say it, you should. I'm just saying that is like, someone finds it attractive.
But
and
I want to know where that cog goes in the machine.
And even if it's not that particular fetish, though, that's just the type of message. It's a very similar message in different form or fashion.
Like, we don't know each other. Why would I give a fuck about what you want? Like,
right. Just because you read my kink list, you read the things on there that I might be interested in, doesn't mean that I'm wanting to do them with you, the first second we meet.
Instantaneously, I shoot my shot. You are ready to go now, and somehow you magically appeared on my bed, chained already. Are you ready for the semen bumping?
Yeah, it doesn't work like that. If you want to get a response, be a human. Treat the person like a human that you want. Unless they specifically say in the profile they don't want to be treated like a human, then that's fine.
See, I think some of these people don't know how to be human very well, though.
Clearly.
Human.exe has stopped functioning since birth.
Well, that's kind of a joke, but it's also that, like, a lot of these people don't understand what human decency is, why you would use it. Because, like, if you have a certain amount of privilege, then you're going to be treated like a human regardless, and you'll assume that's the baseline.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not.
That goes back to a lot of like weird things, like how my concept of what sexuality was. It was very askew as I was growing up, and how to conversate with people was very, very askew as I was growing up, because I was never taught. So I never had the social contract, and I had to learn all of this shit on my own.
Yeah,
some people just never learn it. Clearly,
or they choose not to learn it.
That is also true. But I do thank you for that read. That was a.
That will stick with me until the end of my days.
That's a weird thing that some random dude is just like, I'm gonna say it. No one's gonna stop me.
It just baffles me that people think it would work. Or that it has worked enough times for that to be the fucking go-to. Like, do you know how many times something has to work for me to not think about what I'm going to do? Like,
I'm sure it's more than one.
Yeah.
That's an interesting and depressing topic. But anywho, that's the end of it. That's the end of the show. I do thank everybody that listens. I do thank Porcelina again for coming on and sharing her experience.
Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. Any last words you want to say?
No!
You just did.
Said words.
Oh, so you said a singular. Okay, got it. Anywho, as usual, this is Bound by the Scene. I do thank everybody for listening. Don't forget to follow us or subscribe.
Tip your waitress.
Always tip your waitress on all platforms. Auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, We'll catch you next time. Peace.